Welcome to Montreal Rocks. We're so happy to have with us today Killer Virgins, all the way from Toronto, virtually in our studios today. Welcome, guys and gals.
Thanks so much for having us.
Howdy do.
Pleasure to be here.
Well, I first want to talk about the origin stories. Every superhero has an origin story, and I think it's important. So maybe we'll do it one at a time, but I want you to picture yourself when you're a young child and you're maybe flipping through your parents' record collection, or you hear something that kind of makes music from something that you hear into something that you feel for the first time, and that you get this desire to create music. What would be that moment for you?
Well, I don't know. I mean, Gabe is the percussion expert, so.
So it's about what I heard that made me want to take up drums. I see. Well, if I had to go with my earliest exposure to music and how it factored into myself being a percussionist or songwriter, anything in the genre. I grew up with mostly my dad's records. My dad was a big fan of. He was a big fan of bands like U2, Peter Gabriel, Peter Frampton, Genesis, and all these sorts of acts. And strangely enough, I think it was actually, I could probably attribute Phil Collins as being one of the biggest influences for that, because I didn't realize that he was a drummer. I just thought that he was like a solo artist.
Mhm.
And a big thing that came up for me is I remember very specifically as a child, I watched the movie Tarzan a lot, like a lot. And a little known fact is Phil Collins wrote a few of the songs for that record, and that clicked in my head of like, oh, he's also singing here. He's also writing for movies. He's also like got his work with Genesis. And then my dad had to come by and be like, well, he was also their drummer. It just goes to show that like even though you're playing an instrument that, it typically isn't seen as the front man or the one who's a singer, you can still do that. There's no rules saying you can't. And I think that was probably the biggest like light bulb moment for me, like as a child, thinking like, oh man, it doesn't really matter what instrument I play. I can always just be an artist, be a writer, do any sort of thing like that. And I did end up picking up drums, not really because of Phil Collins, I will admit. It was actually because when you're about like 9, 10 years old and all your friends are getting into playing instruments, every single one of my friends picked up guitar. And I figured like, well, I'm not just going to be another guitar player. Someone needs a drummer at some point. So I just ended up picking up drums, and I never really put sticks down since then, except for learning other instruments, really.
Forget that in the air drum solo. I mean, that was epic.
My God, I remember vividly hearing that on the radio for the first time, like just driving with my dad, and he's like, "Oh, hey, Gabe, it's Phil Collins. You gotta listen to this." And he just turns it up all the way, and he's like, "He's singing and playing drums at the same time. How cool is that?" That was, I guess, vicariously through my dad, I really felt that, like, oh, that's so cool. You never like see drummers who are also singers, who are also songwriters. That's really interesting, you know.
And well, a big part of the foundation of a song is the drums and the bass. And I'm not a musician, right? So, but I love live music, and I've come to learn along the years that when you have a drummer and a bassist that are in sync, it's the foundation of every song. That's the core. And of course, then you add the guitars on top and the voice, and then you have your song. But so, what about for you, Drew? What was the what drew you to the bass?
A long storied past. Much like Gabe, I grew up on my dad's music, right? But my dad was an art school snob. So there was a lot of folk, like Saturday was jazz day, Sunday was classical day. But the one that like I found my own identity in music when I found bands that my dad didn't like, right? From the same generation.
I think it's very important to find your own identity.
Here's the problem is I found a band that my dad went to school with because I fell in love with Rush. I deeply fell in love with Rush. Everything about just the 3-man band, the fact that I could actually hear melodic parts coming out of all 3 players, however that was pulled off on a drum set, right? nobody was holding back in that band. And it was the first time it ever came to my attention that, you know, you can just do anything in art. People will just let you be good at it if you commit hard enough. And, you know, like 5 more bass players and an obsession with King Crimson and Yes. And I really like playing bass guitar.
And of course, Getty and another frontman with a percussion instrument, not a percussion, but you know that
The
bass.
rhythm section, yeah.
And if you listen to Getty's like amazingly complicated bass parts, half the time he's just playing his vocal parts on bass, right? And that's sort of the trick to his magic, and the trick to all the musicians who I love and their magic is you figure out how you do it, right? And that Getty had a way that he plays bass with one finger. If he used both fingers, we'd all explode.
And
Right? But that's how he figured out how to do it. And the same way, like I use a big weird pick. I like play vintage basses. I change out my electronics. It's about your sound at the end of the day, right?
And I mean, I remember hearing Primus for the first time, and a totally different,
Yeah.
just a whole totally different way of playing the bass as a main instrument.
Primus, me too.
Here we go.
Blew my head open. Oh,
Going
sorry.
down.
You just lightning bolt hit my brain on that one.
Sam, you're the guitarist, so tell us a little bit about your history with the.
Yeah.
Your first guitar?
Do I still have my first guitar? Yeah, I think I do. It wasn't anything so crazy. It was just kind of like a knockoff Fender Strat. And oh wait, no, it was a Tele. But noticeably, I didn't like it. I didn't like my guitar, but it was the only guitar I had, so I had to do what I could. I remember when I got my first Strat though, like that was really exciting for me, like going out, picking out the guitar, getting the perfect finish and all the things. But yeah, like my first like exposure to music, like my parents were both punk rockers, so they were just like playing the Sex Pistols and the Damned and stuff in the car when I was a little kid, and so I was just like singing along to all the songs. I just thought it was just the normal songs everybody listened to. I remember like my parents would tell me about me like running around the house when I was like 3 years old singing Courtney Love songs, and like that's all I wanted to do. Like I just wanted to be Courtney Love. Like I just really I loved
Minus some of the drama.
Minus some of the drama, sure, yes. Definitely. But yeah, I always like loved this idea of like the kind of band that Hole was, and like the strong songwriting, and I listened to a whole myriad of different stuff as well. They really like informed me as I was becoming musically literate. Like I remember the first time I heard the B-52s, my head just about exploded. I was like, that's so cool. Like hearing the Arctic Monkeys for the first time, that was like my first like songwriting crush. I was like, I want to write like this man. Like, so everything kind of just came together. But like I was always just running around the house singing my little head off, air guitaring, and eventually then playing guitar and songwriting like all the time.
So I'm seeing a little bit of a pattern. We talked about Tarzan a little bit.
I'm calling you Tarzan.
That's right.
You're
And
new.
then Arctic Monkeys.
Oh.
I think we found out the birth of the
There
banana
you
song.
go.
So before we get into talking about bananas, which is an interesting subject in itself, I want to talk about the year that just passed, 2020. It's been a crazy, crazy year. I know you guys are very passionate about your venues and trying to help out the venues. First of all, what is maybe one venue that you're sad that you've lost, and what can people do to help out venues?
I got one.
You want to go first, Drew?
Yeah, you go
For
first.
me, it was
Go
for
first.
me. It's I know that Rivoli was looking for a seller, or like was looking for a buyer, and that broke my heart. That
Did they
like,
ended up saving it though, right?
did they?
Yeah.
Okay,
As far as
I
I'm
didn't know how
aware.
that one ended.
I remember when they were looking for, like, that was like, whoa, that was, and
Yeah,
Sneaky
that one hit
there
really
too.
home because we had performed there literally a month before lockdown.
Yeah. We were
Oh.
lucky. It was like the very last gig we did was in February 2020. And so it was like, it was a
Little
real
did we
high
know.
moment for us. And then, yeah, to hear that it was looking for a buyer was, and the Sneaky D's too, when there was the whole scare with Sneaky D's
Yeah.
to become a condo, and it will eventually, but then they'll rebuild the venue is what I've heard. But still, like, it's, you know, it's a Toronto institution. Like, I remember also, like, in the Hideout went last year, and that was sad because we played the Hideout a couple times for some of the
I was a regular at their open mic.
Yeah,
yeah.
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 Hideout was like a kind of home base for us, whether we were in or not in this band in some way, shape, or form.
They hated all my bands.
I think probably the one that hit me probably the hardest, I would say, would probably have to be the Silver Dollar. I know, like, that venue.
That was years ago though, wasn't it?
That was a little while ago, but I'd still think, like, it's not just COVID that was the pattern for this. I feel like it's been a little while that this has been going on, and it just got amplified over the past year. And the Silver Dollar, for me, that was just because that was right in the heart of that district. Like, right next door was the Elma Combo, and there were a couple of, like, speakeasies around that area as well. So, like, a big part of Toronto nightlife and music nightlife for, like, at least local artists was based around there. And the Silver Dollar going down kind of felt like the beginning of the end, so to speak. You know.
I also, like, speaking of that exact area, the Kensington area, like the boat we lost during COVID.
Oh,
And the
yeah.
The boat, if I'm being honest, was nothing but a big room. But my God, the shows you could put on in that room. And I'm so sad to lose just a simple venue like that, right? Where it's like they would take all the chairs out when the band was good enough, right? And that's a nice down home kind of feeling that I really hope somebody else gets to do later. I want it all back.
Well, it's one thing to, I mean, we attach sentimental value to buildings for the historic purposes. You know, maybe we've seen this insane band when they were small, you know, roll through town at a certain venue, and now they're playing, the hockey arena or something. But in the end of the day, as long as there's live music, we should be okay, hopefully. But we hope to save as many venues as possible. I think it's very important. You guys have a new song, a new video, which actually features Sneaky D's in it. As you're running along the street.
I got a couple others, but two, but like, yeah, Sneaks is the big one. That was a good shot.
That was fun. That was a lot of fun.
We shot that scene. So we were trying to get this shot of our Banana Man running across Sneaky D's over the graffiti and being chased by the gorilla, but we only had like 3 times to get this shot. And we had the street permits. We were like going at it. But what we couldn't do was control traffic. So we'd have to wait for exactly the right moment when the crosswalks would line up. And I was there like waiting for the little flashing go sign. And I'd just be like, run! And Samson, our banana, would start running and get chased by our gorilla, who was actually played by the producer of the track, Wyatt Dewsome. So that was really fun getting to feature him in the track as well. And fun fact, the gorilla noise that you hear in the song is also our producer, Wyatt.
Okay, good to know. And you have a couple
that's
more
my
of the
favorite trivia.
You got a couple more of the Fruit of the Loom in there. You have a grape, Max, and
yeah, we got our grape person,
your strawberry,
and our strawberry,
and a chef, Steve,
and our chef, Steve. Yes.
So let's talk about bananas. I have banana facts.
All right,
So,
let's go. Bring it on.
I was so ready for this.
I'm ready to go.
So yeah, you might get this a lot, but I want it to be the first one to get them out there. So the bananas are actually classified as a berry.
Yes.
So do you find that as a band, you fit a different classification than the punk label that they put on you?
Oh, Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Punk is a tricky thing because I find that people like to stereotype punk, but for me, what it means to be punk is not to fit into the genre, not to go by the status quo, to do your own thing, to do uncharted territory, to do the unpopular thing, to stay true to yourself. So that's what I consider to be like the heart of punk. That's where I feel like we're more at rather than like the stereotypical like 1, 2, 3, 4 kind of, you know what I mean? That's great too. I think just we broaden ourselves out a little bit more. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think I like thinking of us as like a rock and like for whatever reason, we're a rock and roll band. And what that means in 2020 is weird, right? Like rock and roll sounded different no matter what era it was being made in. And this is just what it sounds like in 2020. And that's hard to stick a genre to, especially when metal bands all get to invent their own.
Yeah, and you're seeing it's if we're going back on the topic of like what it is to be a punk band, and a lot of people say like, well, it's got to have like a certain feel or like rhythm or like at least style to it. But I've heard like so many iterations and so many things that are different, and a lot of things happening now when you see in like the hardcore punk scene and what they're doing in places like Pennsylvania with like Hate 5 6 videos and things like that. And it feels hard to just say like, are these bands hardcore punk or are they not? Because some of them are doing some really interesting, intricate things and like involving bizarre instruments and new interesting songwriting techniques. So I guess for that perspective, I would still say, even though it might not sound punk, they're all doing it in the DIY aesthetic, much like ourselves and all of our punk idols are. So I think if you look at like that, then that would be what really makes a band punk, is if it's all about their DIY aesthetic. Everything is do it yourself, starting from literally nothing, using what you've got to
I
make
love
it
that.
work.
Yeah.
If you think about it, we're talking iconic venues here, CBGBs. You know, you have bands like Blondie and Talking Heads, which were punk.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Yeah.
that I didn't catch that until much later when I figured, oh, they were there at that time playing with the Bad Brains
Yeah.
and all kinds of other the Ramones and all those. Okay, banana fact number 2. Bananas float in water.
Oh yes, you do. That's right.
So what floats your boat, so to speak, when it comes to music?
Ooh.
Oh,
I love a lyric that stays with you. Like whether it's deep or whether it just kind of conks you over the head or if it just gets stuck in your head. Like, I mean, that's what inspired the writing of Banana, was just like the way something sounded. I remember hearing somebody just randomly say, ha ha ha, I want your banana. And it was like lightning struck. It was like, whoa, oh my God, like that's the song. And I just like wrote it almost all in one go. So like I live for those moments, like little moments in songs that stick with you like that.
Like the karate song too. Very catchy. What about you, Drew and Gabe? Floats your boat musically.
Drew, you first or me?
My list is long.
Uh,
So
I guess I'll do mine first and I'll keep it brief while you think it over.
I'm trying to bring it down to 18 words. Give me a minute.
Okay, floats my boat musically. I guess if I wanted to go for the most generic one, like I guess it's a mix between just like good riffs, because I grew up listening to a lot of metal, and it just like with bands like that, you want to look for the money riff, so to speak, and I actually look for that a lot, but then I also have a really big affiliation with bands that sound as unique as they can. So like any artist that I would put in the vein of like experimental, so to say, because it piques my interest of like, oh, this, I'm never going to hear something like this other than from this artist. If you think of artists like Tom Waits, or like even modern bands like Death Grips, or Talking Heads, like we mentioned before, with David Byrne's very unique vocal style and style of production, things like that are the other things that really pique my interest, just because it's I like to live by the theory that every artist deserves a chance. So like if you hand me your record, yeah, I'll give it a listen. because you put your effort into this. You have one chance to wow me. And for a band to make me think, for a band to really show the prowess of being utterly unique, I think that's probably what I search for the most, is for a band that I know I will never have that sound from anybody else.
Awesome. Drew,
Yeah.
in
Gabe and
1,000
I-
words or less.
Yeah, I know. Gabe and I connected over the like give anybody a chance thing, right? Like it was common practice for Gabe and I when we were like hanging out together to just stick on a record and either find things wrong with it or find something to enjoy with it, right?
I remember when we met in college, and I would like sit you down and show you like Swans or Daughters, like
Yeah.
these just incomprehensible noise bands, and we'd find something about it that we liked.
And I love noise stuff. I love experimental stuff. I love, much like Gabe, it's like anything I can't hear again, right? I have like, I keep my top 10 records on my wall, but I'm constantly rotating through stuff and stuff and stuff and stuff and stuff. And it's honestly anybody who's trying hard, right? I'm a musician's musician, right? I don't even care if there's a vocalist. If you're all trying hard and this sounds like something, I'm there for it.
As long as it speaks to you, it awakens something within inside of you, I think is important when it comes to music.
Totally.
Mhm.
And don't close doors to yourself, right? Turns out there's a couple classical, like there's some, I've been to see opera and enjoyed it a couple times, right? Like you'd be surprised what you'd enjoy. So don't let the image of the art that you're enjoying get in the way of finding more, right? So many good bands out there.
And just like your song about labels, it's the same thing. A lot of people will identify with one type of music, and then they won't go outside of it or venture outside of it because they identify or they've put that label onto themselves. I'm this. I'm a metalhead. I'm a punk. I'm a classical musician. Or so it's good to get outside your comfort zone and be exposed to something new. Next fact: humans. I don't know how accurate this is, but humans share about 50% of our DNA with bananas.
That's a surprising amount.
50%.
50%.
I feel the banana within, so
So
I
to
identify with that.
complete this sentence, Killer Virgins shares 50% of our DNA with this band.
Ooh.
I know Sam's answer, but I don't want to say it
How
for
do you
her,
already know you presume to know my answer?
because you normally give the same one, but I don't know, maybe you've changed the script. Is there
Well,
a script? Do I
I don't
just
know.
think there's a script?
What does it mean to you? What first of all, what do you think I was gonna say? And then what would you say?
I thought you were going to go straight for Arctic Monkeys.
Well, so you
there's-
do know me well.
There's a huge
Nope.
amount of influence there, right? Like it shows in what you do, right? In the way that things have been put together, right? Like you're very inspired by just the way that band is handled, right? Like a lot in the way that we put our songs together, and now
Yeah.
in the way that we're producing things is
Yeah.
sort of the like constant thinking about it, rotating kind of go to that it seems that
Yeah.
band had.
Yeah,
And
I think you're right, because I do
Right.
think about songwriting in a similar way. Like, and I don't know, I wouldn't know. It's not like I've been into many of the songwriting sessions, but for me, like, I remember everyone has that like musical awakening, and when they're around like 14, 15, 16. And I just remember the first time I heard the Strokes and the Arctic Monkeys, and it was like, oh my God, like this is it. Like, and I remember really it just yeah, the way that the Arctic Monkeys create songs really kind of like stuck with me, is like feeling true to that pull. I feel like everybody has that pull of what feels right, of what they need to do. And for me, I wanted to kind of like bring that kind of feeling along with like the punk roots that I'd come from, and also like other stuff too. Like, I think our band is more like a pie chart with lots of little pieces. But there's also stuff from like the Chili Peppers in there. There's stuff from the Sex Pistols in there. There's stuff from like even more recent bands like Le Butcherettes. in there. Like it's
Exactly.
it's a multi-flavored pie for sure.
Gabe
So
and I
you're a
are
hybrid band.
Gabe and I sound like Primus playing for someone else.
So I think a hybrid band would be semantic monkeys.
Mm.
Brilliant.
All right. So the next fact: the inside of a banana peel can help relieve itching and inflammation.
Ah, yes, I've heard that about
So
rubbing
what,
a banana peel on like insect bites or
exactly,
something.
yeah.
Yeah.
So what healing effect does your music have on both yourself and your audience?
Wow. Love that. Who wants to start? Gabe, you want to start this time?
Healing effect that music like our music might have on an audience, or like our music will have on us.
Well, I think a lot. First, let's start with what the effect it has on you, because I think music for a lot of artists is a healing instrument. It's something where you get to share your emotions, which I think is why we enjoy musicians. I just talked about somebody else. We enjoy musicians more than actors because actors play somebody else's emotions. Musicians play their own.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Great.
Um, I would say, at least for myself, how music helped me as I used to have I remember when I was younger, I used to have quite a bit of anger issues, and there was a lot of music that I grew up with, but it didn't quite like scratch that itch that I really needed. I needed something a little more frantic. And I guess for me, like the real aha moment for like I think I found what I really enjoy more than everything else was my brother came home with like a little stack of records that he got from a friend, and in there were like let's see who was there. There was Linkin Park, there was Slipknot, there was In Flames for like that Swedish death metal sound, and Bullet for My Valentine, who were really big at the time, and Behemoth, who like for me I was a little bit too young for that. Like that was a little bit too extreme, but it was the fact that I'd found something that was like as fast and as aggressive as I hadn't heard before. And for me, it was like, especially learning how to play drums, then it was like, oh, you're telling me that I can play drums faster and harder. You say, okay. So I guess for me, that was a big one. It was a real way for me to like channel all of that energy and all of that like pent up emotion that I had in a way that wasn't just like playing along to my dad's Genesis records, or the one copy of Back in Black that my aunt had let me borrow. Like that was a little bit too slow for what I really wanted to do. And then suddenly drumming along to like Slipknot when you're going like super fast, it was like, oh, that's what I needed. That's the adrenaline rush that's all been pent up in me. So I think that's something that I want to portray, is like that real pent up emotion sort of feeling, and really letting that out, whether it's I guess anger mostly.
And what's interesting is I remember hearing Maynard speak about anger and aggression in music, and like like if you have to yell to get your anger out, and you're still doing it years and years later, like is it really working? It's okay. So it's okay to have that for a period of time, but you can evolve. Like you don't have to yell all the time. Like eventually, you're going to solve your problems. Hopefully.
Yeah, and it's interesting when you bring that up, because I have seen a pattern of a lot of bands not go softer, so to speak, over time, but wanting to introduce more melody in their singing, like, with the recent records of like, well, again, Slipknot, for example, Corey Taylor, rather than just aside the fact of him kind of blowing out his vocal cords and like having to do recuperation because of the amount of screaming he was doing at a young age, but he started singing a lot more in their recent records. You also see bands like Code Orange, who when they started they were like as aggressive as punk could get, but on their recent record it's more singing than screaming, and I'm all for it. Like once you paint yourself in a corner that all you can do is scream, well, where do you go from there? Does your screaming get louder? Does it get in a different style? Like,
Anybody else have thoughts on how music can affect you or
I
your?
mean,
Drew, you look like you're ready to.
I always
Wow.
am, but I mean, like the word of the day for a lot of musicians is always catharsis, right? Like that's what a lot of us get out of this,
Yeah.
right? It's it's really nice to walk into a room and be really loud for a couple hours. In our day-to-day lives, we don't get to do that very often. I live in a house with 4 musicians, and even I don't get to yell that much, right? So it's nice to turn the amp up to 7 or 8. It's nice to feel like you're in control of the thing. And like that's what I get healing wise out of music. I get a confidence from that I didn't find in anything else I ever did in my life.
I love
Right?
that.
That's awesome.
For me, it's like creating music and especially writing lyrics for me is like shining a flashlight on a wound. Sometimes, not always are you writing about something that's painful, but for me, I find that I'm drawn a lot to writing about not necessarily trauma, not especially not in the case of Banana. Banana was just about something that sounded fun to me. But for some of my songs, like Keep the Corkscrew, for example, like that was a song of me shining a flashlight right at the wound that I didn't want to look at and saying, okay, here it is. Let's create some art about it. And I love that, like that idea that we're able to take things that might seem ugly or painful to us, but transform it and create something beautiful with it, create art with it, express ourselves through that way. And I hope as many people do that as possible. I find art to be so healing that way, even in like, for example, my roommate that I live with is a painter. I don't do visual art stuff. Like it's not what I'm drawn to, but she was doing like this watercolor thing and she encouraged me to come do it with her. She was like, it doesn't matter if you're good or not. Like sometimes it can just be good to like get it out on the page. And I can relate to that with words, but I've never tried with paint. And it was just a process of like putting all these colors on the page and then you like, you know, press a piece of paper onto it and transfer it. And I'd been having a cruddy day. And I just remember looking down at that paper and being like, I'm going to show this piece of paper how I'm feeling. And I just threw it all on there. And it was as soon as I pulled up the paper and I looked at what I had done, it was like I felt this release. And it's like once you put it out there and you see, like, oh, this can be beautiful. And I just find that so cool.
It's interesting you mentioned that because a lot of times, even some of the bands that we've talked about so far tonight, put out things that are really painful.
Yeah.
But you could say, you could put on a label of it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Pain can be beautiful if it's brought in a certain way. If it's pain, especially if it's pain that you're releasing.
Definitely.
Pain that you're keeping is not beautiful because
Yeah.
you have to work on it. But once you release it, it can be beautiful to see it go off into the
Totally.
distance,
People can be
off of the
beautiful,
flat earth,
right?
right?
Yeah.
Totally. And I love what you said too about that idea of like keeping it in isn't, because it's keeping it in is almost like that self-flagellation, right? You're just like, oh, I can't release this. It means too much. I need to hold this. And you're just punishing yourself at like, you know, not to delve too much into the realm of positive psychology, but this idea that like we can punish ourselves to get better isn't supported as much by science as the idea of like reinforcing and loving ourselves and putting that out there. And so I love that idea of releasing can be a form of therapy as well and can be a form of self-love.
I got another fact for you.
Oof.
Bring it.
I got 2 more. So this is going longer than I thought. So I hope you're okay with it. But Patrick Whiteman, I think, from the UK, of course, ran just under a 3-hour marathon dressed as a banana.
Oh,
It's impressive.
wow.
Excellent.
Very nice. Good banana speed.
So what's the craziest thing you've ever done as a band?
Oh,
Probably make this music video, honestly.
Yeah, the entire filming day for the music video was a big one. That whole thing
That
was
weekend
like,
was insane.
yeah.
It
Like
must have been interesting to get the reaction of the people on the street. I mean,
It was the best part. Like when we would be walking by, we were shooting out in front of the Bovine Sex Club. And I remember as we were walking down Queen, it was like all these people kept turning their heads as this like banana and a monkey would walk by. This guy like fully was like, hey, take my picture with the monkey. And we have that in the credits section at the end of the video. this guy that really wanted to take a picture with Wyatt.
It's monkey fame.
Monkey
It was so
fever.
wonderful. It was the whole day of just walking around downtown with a guy in a monkey suit and having a reason to do that.
Totally.
Right? It's not like the time I was running around like a pineapple for no reason, right? Like it's
So did you invest in the monkey suit and the banana suit, or were they rentals?
Well, the banana suit was an investment, but the monkey suit unfortunately was a rental.
okay. I have a story on that because Wyatt worked out the math. Yeah. Well, we worked out the math because it turns out 6 rentals is equal to the cost of just buying the banana suit from them.
You mean the
So
monkey suit?
Wyatt, yeah, went right down and tried to schedule 6 times in his life that he would need this suit. And we've hit 3 since. So
Hang
it
on,
would have
what are
been
the other
worth it.
reasons he would need it? I want to know.
We've had 3 days where that monkey suit would have been the funniest thing on the planet.
What?
Would have broken me wide open.
What was going on those days?
I can't quite remember all of it.
maybe some of the TMI moments, but I can see when a monkey suit can come in handy.
There's times. Some days it's right to wear it.
And of course,
Sometimes you're cold.
Could be a prop. It could be a business expense. It's a prop for your video.
There you go. It's a
Right,
right.
right.
Performance one day.
We worked that out. We worked out how to get a tax return for it,
Oh my
guys.
God.
Like we did the homework here. We've been thinking about it. It's not that much.
Oh man.
My last fact, and it's just one of those crazy things. I haven't even created a question for it. I'm just going to go on the fly. A man in India once ate 81 bananas in half an hour.
Bananas are slightly radioactive.
Exactly. That was another fact. So what's the most, what's the biggest accomplishment that you have as a band that you feel that you've accomplished?
Eating
Almost like
14
eating-
bananas.
That is a big accomplishment.
Maybe a venue you played that you didn't expect.
Yeah, I was gonna say probably our show at the Horseshoe was it for me. I don't know, Dave,
That
what do
was a
you
big
think?
night. Yeah.
I mean, the show at the Horseshoe, that did feel significant because of the experience of, wow, we got to play the Horseshoe. Like everybody shared this stage, from like U2 and like David Bowie to like Talking Heads and just Rolling Stones and just everybody. Like,
Yeah.
but I think for me personally was again, I kind of got to hammer home just how personal this one was for me, was our show at the Rivoli, because we were at that show. We felt, for me personally, at least, we felt a little bit out of place. We were playing with a band called Paper Parachutes and another band called Soulish, and they were mostly like more softer than us, and they felt a little bit more, well, soul, and a little bit more, not sort of say pop, but that blue-eyed soul feeling. So then us standing there, for me it felt really intimidating, because I'm seeing all these like very high level musicians, and this place is completely full to the brim, and I'm sweating and nervous, thinking to myself, like, we don't belong here. Why are all these people here aren't for us? And I'm just kind of glad that everybody came the reassurance of like, don't you think that because you're here means that you are at this level, like the same level as these artists? And I think for me, that was probably a big accomplishment for us, not just playing to like a fully loaded room, but that even with these artists that didn't quite share a lot with us, we still felt like we fit in and everybody still enjoyed us. I think that for me personally was a much more major accomplishment.
That's awesome. That's cool. I just like, this was the first time that we've done a real music video, and for me being an actor as well, I've always really just been on the acting side of production stuff. So this was my first time wearing the producer hat, which was a total trial by fire too, because when we decided to make this, our director, Brendan Chipman, we were both co-producing. So I was like, oh yeah, sure. Like, I'll just do what we got to do. I didn't really know what I was getting myself into. All of a sudden, flash forward to me filling out insurance documents and stuff and being like, oh my God, like this is so much, and coordinating costumes and booking people and getting the studio. It was like crazy. So in terms of like the whole band, like that feels for me like personally, kind of like how Gabe was saying, like this personally for me, filmmaking wise, this was like my favorite accomplishment from the band so far, was being able to like delve into that realm of filmmaking and being able to make this music video that not only felt like really fun and was like, had a good kind of story and stuff that went through it, but like my biggest my biggest thing was like, if we're gonna make a music video, like we gotta have an amazing time doing it. Like we gotta have so much fun. And I just remember, Gabe, especially you, I just remember you that day in studio when you were on that drum kit and you were so happy. You and Drew.
I was
so
screaming all day. You couldn't stop me.
It brought me so much joy to be like, this is what I dreamed of. Like
we got to the studio at like 8 a.m. and then we left around like 8 or 9 p.m. and in those 13 hours, I smiled the whole time. I had such a blast doing that.
Yeah.
Great. So make sure you tune in, watch the banana video. It's on every platform. We'll put some links in the show notes. And and if ever you need a banana suit, you know where to call. Call the Killer Virgins.
We got that banana suit on lock.
I'm making a collection.
Unfortunately, there'll be a little bit more work for a monkey suit, but
we already have 3 reasons.
I think we're justified at this point.
Honestly, like send us a DM. Let us know your reasons that we should get the monkey suit. Maybe if we get 6, maybe we'll just invest.
Maybe we'll do a GoFundMe.
Oh yeah, let's do it.
Do a GoFundMe for the monkey suit.
Yes, we'll get the GoFundMe page going.
All right, thank you guys. I'm really happy that you were able to spend some time with us, and we got to know you a little bit more. We got to understand your DNA. You've got the DNA of that classic rock from the percussion section, and then you've got the punk. You mashed it all together, and that's who you are. And it really shows. You guys have a lot of fun. It's a lot of tongue-in-cheek songs, but I think there's a deeper message behind some of the deeper ones, and we hope that one day you will find your corkscrew, that it will fall out of the backpack and somebody will bring it back home for you.
Yes,
I like it.
Still in the pack.
All right, thanks guys.
Thank you, Randall, so much.
Thank you, Randall. Enchanté.